Hi, and welcome back to Grief and Motherhood, where we hold space for the raw, the real, and the resilient journey of motherhood after loss. I'm your host, Caitlin, and today we have a truly special guest joining us. I am so excited to introduce you all to Sarah Mayfield, who is a mother, an advocate, and a passionate supporter of bereaved youth and families. After the loss of her son Elliot, Sarah struggled to find informed grief services for her surviving son Bradley. That experience led her to dedicate her life to grief education and awareness. She's a compassionate bereavement care certified provider, a certified thanatologist, and a nationally certified counselor. Sarah has also brought her passion to life through her debut book, This Sure Thing, a beautiful resource for grieving children and families. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Sarah, could you really just walk us through your journey of grief?
Sure,
And,
sure.
I'm so sorry about the loss of your son.
Thank you,
Could
Caitlin.
you just share with us that journey, what this
Sure.
looked like for you and your family?
So I guess I would like to start by first just talking a little bit about the history before. And, as a mom, I think it all starts with the firstborn kid, right?
Sure.
So my son Bradley, who you mentioned a second ago,
Yes.
was born in 2014. He's actually going to be 11 on Sunday. Crazy, right?
Awesome.
I know.
Yes.
He was born, and my husband and I started talking about, then moving on to having a second. The idea being that both of our sets of siblings, my husband's and
Mhm.
my own, were kind of formative for us growing up, right? And we were pretty close in age on both sides of our family. So we started planning and talking about it, and we thought, 2.5 years is like perfect, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, along came Elliot in 2018, November. And Bradley and Elliot played together. So Bradley was a little bit, around 2.5 up until 4. And it was just so cool to watch because a lot of their interests were in alignment, right? Because there wasn't that big
Hmm.
of a gap in age.
Sure.
So they would play with the similar toys and just a lot of activity with two
Yeah.
with two little boys, right?
Yes, I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. Just it was really wonderful, and hindsight's 2020, of course. In February of 2000, sorry, Elliot was born in 2016. He died in 2018. Sometimes the dates get a little wonky.
Sure.
So in February of 2018, I was just thinking, I have, you have a baby monitor.
Yeah.
Still used it even though he was over a year old. And I remember thinking, I didn't really hear much from him the night before. We had taken him in to see a doctor because he had like a runny nose. But oh my gosh, we have pictures of him from that night at the doctor's office. My husband holding him up. They had like these giant crayons hanging from the ceiling,
Yeah.
and he loved them, and they were so colorful, like primary colors. And so there's a picture of him like laughing and touching the crayon. He was running around the whole doctor's office,
Yeah.
just having a blast, right? But being the helicopter parents, we
Hmm.
took him in, and everything checked out fine. We were sent home. So I remember thinking back to the monitor. I haven't really heard much activity on the monitor. And so I went in to check on him at 6 a.m. and he was dead. And he had been dead for a while. Rigor mortis had set in. I remember his one arm, he was laying on his stomach and it was kind of locked into that position. And I knew the second I touched him because his knees kind of fell down. They were still warm from being in contact with the bed.
Sure.
Um, and so somehow Bradley didn't wake up through all of this. Somehow. I
Wow.
don't know
Yeah.
because his room is right around the same area, right? So of course screaming for my husband who was already up and working remotely in his office.
Yeah.
And I had this image in my head, and in those early days, months, years,
Yeah.
because I argue it's a lot more than months.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those images kind of haunted me of me holding him there and my husband coming around the corner
Hmm.
and seeing him and me saying he's dead. And so I go into kind of, I guess, logic mode. This is what I've realized
Hmm.
about myself over the years. I'm not crying, I'm not hysterical, I'm just kind of, I don't know, I go into problem solving mode or something.
Sure.
So, um, I remember handing Elliot to my husband, and I
Hmm.
remember like picturing him sitting, there's like roughly what, 13 stairs in a flight, so he was like right in the middle.
Hmm.
And I can just remember looking at him and seeing him holding him, and just the reality sinking in that this is real.
Yeah.
This is final. There's no undoing this. And that was an image that played over a lot in my mind in those early days. And, it didn't even cross my mind to call 911 because what's the point? I'll be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Oh, sure.
But that's kind of a process, obviously, you have to go through.
Mhm.
So one of the things that's was hard for my husband and hard in retrospect was him having to do CPR,
Mhm.
despite, you know,
Yeah,
Elliot being very clearly gone.
sure.
And so he was doing CPR, and I ran over to the neighbor's house, the next door neighbor's house. It was still
Yeah,
dark. It was 6 in the morning. It was still dark, February, and yelling outside their window. Because what are you going to do? I don't have any family local to where I live. So, and luckily they came to the window because, I may not, depending on if I think it's something going on that I don't want to be
right.
a part
Yeah.
of.
Yeah,
And so my lovely neighbor, Mrs. Sherry, she was probably what in her 70s at the time. She came over and, was shell shocked just like all of us.
sure.
But I woke up my son, my older son, Bradley, and
Yeah,
he went directly over to the neighbor's house. I didn't want him to be around or involved or see anything.
absolutely.
I actually told the police officer who had arrived in the
Oh,
meantime that he had to stand under the stairs because
oh,
I did not want my living son to see him or have that memory. Police officers.
yeah,
So just chaos. A lot of people just sitting there knowing this is final, and that just the
sure.
awful feeling in your stomach. The just
I can't
there's
even imagine. Yeah,
yeah, the words are just I always say words fall short, It's good to try,
absolutely.
but they don't skim
Sure.
the surface for this life altering
Hmm.
stuff. And so then began the whole process of
Yeah,
just how do you adjust to this magnitude of a thing that you didn't see coming?
sure.
Um,
Do you feel like there is a before and an after?
oh heck
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. That for my husband and me,
Hmm.
that's like a timestamp, right?
Sure.
There are so many ways that just even the simplest things of like just seeing life
Hmm.
differently or the things that mattered to me back
Yeah,
then that just
absolutely.
don't mean jack to me now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, just the friendships that have changed as a
Hmm.
result. My career trajectory,
Hmm.
I used to be a school counselor, so I've always had the counseling thing in me.
Sure.
But once Elliot died, I was like, well, I know what I'm going to focus on and what I'm passionate about because
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a passion to me right now. Additionally, I think time is interesting, right?
Hmm.
Speaking to the before and after, I would often sit there and think, gosh, even as the months and the years went on, it feels like just this morning that I found him. It has that sense of rawness and still newness, right?
Sure.
But then you sit there and think, wow, it feels like a different lifetime. It feels like a
Yeah.
century ago or centuries ago that I also found him dead.
Hmm.
So the before and after thing, it's such a
Yeah.
big weird concept that touches everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I go back and I say this a lot. I've said this in a few other podcasts, but I can truly tell you that for me, I'm not the same mother I was
Mm,
before my
mm,
losses and then
mhm.
after,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
completely different. Like you
yeah.
said, the trajectory of everything, it just changes
It
you.
changes.
Hmm.
Caitlin, would now be an okay time for me to ask a little bit about you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
So Caitlin, you've had three
Yes, we
losses.
lost three little girls. Yeah. So I have three living boys. They're my greatest blessings. I can't imagine life without them. Um, yeah, our hardest loss, and it's funny because I would never compare a loss. Of
Sure.
course, they're all losses. They're all traumatic. I miss them all.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but our last loss was our daughter Lainey at 37 weeks.
Hmm.
We were so close to meeting her, literally 2 weeks away, and
Yeah.
she was our supposed to be our happy ending after, our
Yeah.
previous two losses. And then, it
Gosh.
was, gosh, it was, it's out of nowhere. I mean, you don't ever expect to lose a child.
No,
Um,
shouldn't have to.
and
Yeah.
that's something I continue to go back to. It's like, I don't understand. No parent should ever outlive their child,
No, no,
truly.
Anachronistic, it's not supposed to happen. It's out of order,
Yep.
right? That's
Yep.
why it's put in the traumatic category.
Yep. I
Yep.
I agree. So,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for asking. It's definitely changed me, but this why I'm here today, talking to moms who have
Gosh, I love
dealt
that you
with the
do
loss.
this. I love
Thank
that you
you
do
so
this.
much. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really helped me truly heal, and then just connecting with other lost moms like you,
Hmm.
um, who, are also trying to help other people who have felt, faced the grief that we have.
Yeah.
It's a community that, of course, you don't ever want to be a part of it. It's
No.
like it's
No.
not a path
And we'd all give
anybody.
it back in a hot second.
Exactly,
Like, bye.
exactly. Yes,
Bye,
right.
Caitlin.
I know. Exactly. But it's
Yeah.
like I've said this before too. I have never met the nicest, most supportive, loving community in this lost community.
Yeah.
Truly. Like it's a community like no other. And I keep calling it a community because I don't really, there's no words for, what do you call it? Like a lost family. I mean, really,
Right. It's
there's,
connection,
it
bottom
is, it
line.
is. And
Connection with like something, you know, the worst thing.
absolutely the worst possible thing.
Hmm.
And I think that is also what also makes it more like a beautiful connection, you
I was
know?
going to say beautiful, but I didn't want to push it.
Yeah. No,
I did
no,
not
no,
want
I
to
know.
happiness watch it. But the funny thing is, you can say, like, just going to be honest, I feel like I
Yeah.
can say that with another breed mom, but if I were to
Yep.
say that like outside,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yep.
I always have the fear that it's going to be taken like, oh, she's healed, she's better,
Yeah, exactly.
everything's great now. And
Because I'm
so,
laughing, I can,
yeah,
I'm okay.
yeah,
Which also leads me to I would like to ask about
yeah,
your other son and how
yeah,
he has, man, I can't imagine as a sibling. Just to kind of go into this, I want to
sure,
tell you my boys,
yeah,
so my older two have faced the loss with us.
mm,
They've dealt with it all. We actually let them. We wanted them, my husband and I, to come to the hospital to meet
hmm,
her, to meet
yeah,
Lainey, to hold her, to
yes,
have that closure. And it's funny because it's something that some of our family and friends did not agree with. But again, that was our choice. We're their
it's your
parents.
choice. Yep, exactly right.
Yeah. So, I kind of wanted to lead with that
Yeah.
to kind of go into how you guys transitioned
Mm.
with your son and with that loss and kind of what that looked like for your family.
Sure. First, I love that you did that.
Hmm.
I don't love that it happened, but I love that
Sure,
that's how you
sure.
responded to
Yeah,
it and included
yeah.
them.
I
I
mean,
love
that's
that so.
just
I
an
just got
up.
chills. I love that so
Oh,
much.
thank you.
Because there's a lot of instinct. So I'm pretty passionate about childhood grief, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of instinct to protect, like,
Mm-hmm.
make it better, fix it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm picturing like bubble wrap around a kid, right?
Yeah.
And we're doing so much detriment to them. Like we're
Sure.
basically giving them the message that it's not healthy to grieve and that
Mm-hmm.
something's wrong with grieving.
Yeah.
And so I love that you gave them the opportunity to grieve. And that's
Sure.
taken away so much from
Mm-hmm.
kids, in my opinion.
I agree with you, and
Yeah.
especially boys.
Yeah.
I feel like they're not allowed to cry. It's like, no, yes,
Right.
they are. Like
Right. Yeah.
they have emotions just like we
That's
do.
exactly right. Yeah. Um, so your question was about Bradley and how kind
Yes.
of that played out. So for me, obviously the grief, uh, I'll be honest, I've often used the word terror, like terrorizing.
Yeah.
It's like you're watching a scene and you're feeling a scene that is the
Hmm.
worst, right? It's just panic, fear, terror. I don't sugarcoat there.
No,
Um,
that's okay. You know
yeah,
what? I want the listeners
okay.
and everybody to be able to fully understand.
Yeah. It's your worst nightmare is folding out in
Yeah.
front of you. And
Sure.
so it's real. It's very real when you're holding a body that is no
Mm,
longer breathing.
hmm.
Um, so with that said, um, after it's an investigation, obviously, because
Hmm.
it's sudden and unexpected. So after the detectives left and after first responders took his body to the hospital, my husband and I went to the hospital, did the whole seeing his body and talking to the
Hmm.
doctors there. And then when we came back, my neighbor still had my son at the time.
Sure.
My parents drove into town and came to the home so that they could take over watching Bradley.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember getting home from the hospital and saying to my husband, um, we just have to do it. We have to tell him sooner rather than later because he had no
Yeah.
idea. You know,
Sure.
we were gone.
And
His
he
brother was gone.
was
He was just shy of 4.
four. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, old enough to know that there's
Oh,
going to be,
yeah.
yeah. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. Old enough to pick up on everything.
yep.
And I also think that sidebar,
Yeah.
n- like, Alan Wolfelt,
Hmm.
anyone old enough to love is old enough to grieve.
Sure. Sure.
Whether we're thinking
Yep.
hardcore memories or we're just the whole body is affected. I mean, all this stuff. So,
Yes.
um, I told my husband we need to do it, and sooner rather than later. Once again, the logical
Hmm.
mood. I'm just like
Yes.
thinking, what else do I need to do? And I remember sitting down in front of him in the chair, and this was one of
Mm.
the harder things, and just being very direct and saying that Elliot died. And of course, we don't have any answers. We don't have anything. We don't know what to tell him why or
Right.
how. And then you're also thinking in real time, if I tell him he died in his sleep, is he going to start getting worried that he's going to die? I mean, all these
Yes. Oh,
things. There's
yeah.
no rule book for this,
Right.
Like
And there shouldn't
no,
have to be, like,
no, that's a crappy rule book, right?
yes, yes.
So I remember telling him Elliot died. We don't really know,
Hmm.
most likely something was he was sick most likely or something was wrong with his body, but
Hmm.
we don't know, but he's dead. He's not here anymore. And we are very sad.
Hmm.
Um and just kind of sat there and it was it was
Yeah,
very difficult.
I can't even imagine,
Yeah.
just, oh, it's just,
You
yeah,
can a little bit.
yeah. Just,
Um, it just feels like what is the word macabre, whatever the word is, however you pronounce
yeah,
that.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Because then what we did, I was like, well, we can sit here in the house
Mhm.
and
Right.
I'll stare at him and stare at the walls, or we can take him
Mhm.
to a playground. It's only been a couple hours since my son died, or we can take him to a playground and let him at least run around and be a
Sure.
kid while it's all sinking
Right.
in. And
Yes.
so there's pictures. I just saw these recently
Mm,
of my parents, my husband, and me on this playground, just like looking shell-shocked, like zombies,
yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Um, but that was I was like, we either do it here or we can go to a playground and sit and stare too. So as you know, it's repetition. They're
Hmm.
repeating, talking about it, reassuring him, telling him over and over again. There's a lot of questions and a lot of
Oh,
repeat questions.
yeah.
By far the hardest thing for me personally was watching him grieve because and this ties into what we were saying a second ago, people desperately don't want a kid to be in pain. That's the number
Yeah.
one reason. I
Yeah.
believe that shows that people ultimately care. I'm not trying to say
No,
negative
I get it.
stuff.
Yep.
However, um, things like, him being resilient and he'll get over it and he's
Hmm.
so young, he won't remember. Those were like knives to my heart because
Yeah. Hmm.
do we go around saying that to adults?
Right.
No.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, it's like, what are we
Right.
trying to do? Why are we trying to diminish his experience? Sure, it might look different. Um, it does not look like I am sad because my brother died and I want to talk about it right now, especially not for an almost 4-year-old. What it looked like was screaming and crying, refusing to get into the tub, which was a shared activity with his brother. What it
Mhm.
looked like was night terrors every night, right?
Mhm.
And he never had those before.
Sure.
What it looked like was anger at school, hitting the walls at school. Anger, big time anger, and just kind of disorganized behavior, I would call it.
Mhm.
And just, I remember even on the way to the park that morning, my loud and crazy kid who
Mhm.
never stopped moving or talking, right? We're talking energy, just
Sure.
staring out the window and not talking. And it took everything in my being to not say anything and just let him have his moment.
Yes. To just really,
Just shut your mouth, Sarah. What can you
yep.
even
I
say?
know.
Nothing's going to make it better. Don't tell him to not be sad. Don't tell him it'll
Oh,
get
yeah.
better. Like,
Yeah.
just let him have his moment. And that was so painful. But I could just see his little heart and mind were trying to process
Yeah.
what the hell was going on. We all were.
I know. I can't, yeah.
Yeah.
Just, I feel like, sibling grief. I feel like people don't think about that enough.
No,
Like,
no.
because it's
It's,
like, oh, you're the parents, you're grieving.
we get all
But
the attention.
we are also, they are grieving
Yeah.
also,
Yeah. We're the ones who are openly looking shell-shocked and crying. They're the
Yes.
ones who, due to attention span, cognitive development, whatever,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
ping-ponging a little bit more. There
Yeah.
might be an
Yep. That's a
explosion,
good.
but then,
Sure.
right back to the dose. It's dosing of grief. They do it
Yeah.
maybe a little, maybe better
I will
sometimes than
say,
adults.
yeah, we dealt with that a lot
Okay,
also.
tell me.
Yeah, I think, my oldest actually started bedwetting again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a question
Um,
we ask for kids
hmm Yep.
coming into therapy. Yeah.
And he was, gosh, it's been August will be two years now. So
Oh, wow.
he was 8 at the time. He just
Oh,
turned 8. Yeah. So I mean, and that's, obviously he's been potty trained for how long,
sure,
so
sure.
um again with the anger,
Yep.
he's my oldest is definitely more my, higher spirited one, we'll say,
Spirited. I
yeah,
like that. Spirited.
strong-willed, if you will. Yeah. Um so yeah, we dealt with it a lot. My middle son, he is really like my emotional one. So he will still randomly burst into tears and say, I miss the
Oh,
girls.
buddy.
I know. But again, we have these open conversations with them, and
Yes.
we still are, we celebrate Lainey, we celebrate the other girls, we celebrate their birthdays, we still talk about them, you know, almost daily. We have, their shelf with all their memories, and, so it's like those things, and they're not bad. It's not bad. It's not a bad thing to talk about them and to remember them. They're still part of our family.
Absolutely.
Um, so, when you hear just these stories like, oh, we weren't allowed to talk about it. We weren't allowed to talk about our grief, and it's like, but why?
Gosh.
It makes
Gosh.
me so sad.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I'm not glad that you had to go through it, but I'm
No,
glad
of
that
course not. I know you
you're
weren't.
open, and yeah,
Yeah.
like, and just, able to share, that
Yeah.
grief. And so, moving
Thank
forward
you.
for you guys, what was that like? Just,
Yeah.
after, kind of the, everything kind of got,
Right.
I don't even know the words.
Well, the new normal, or
Yes, I
the new
know. It's
reality, or
right.
I just would say, I usually integrating the loss or something. Well, you know how it is after, um, the family pushes in, the friends push
Hmm.
in. There's a lot of people around, so that it can kind of be sometimes a protective factor where, you don't have to, you feel it, but you don't have to focus so much on the loneliness and the singular nature of grief, right? Like
Sure.
me looking at my grief, like,
Hmm.
right, holy cow. Because there's the family grief, right? There's the maybe spouse or partner grief, right?
Hmm.
But then there's ultimately, our grief that we have
Hmm.
to, right? It's our brains, it's our
Yep.
hearts, and laying there at night, it's you.
Hmm.
Um, so I think once all the noise retreats
Sure.
and the cards stop and the people go, and I just remember sitting there and at the little kitchen nook and being like, it just knocked the wind out of me just seeing his chair sitting there. And so
Oh,
for the
yeah.
longest time, we left his little, the
Mhm.
little thing that you can put in. It's not quite a high chair. It's like
Yes.
the adapter thing. We left it there for the longest time. Like to your point, no, um, we intentionally do things to honor him, and I'll get to that in a
Yeah.
second. But
Yeah.
your question was, how did we adjust? I
Yeah.
mean, it was a lot of it was just clawing through each day,
Yep. Sure.
army crawling. That's how I envision it.
Yeah.
Having to go to the preschool where they both went and dropped Bradley off, but not
Mm.
Elliot, and seeing the people look at you, and they don't
Yeah.
know what to do.
Oh,
I
I
did,
know.
I didn't, and I still don't sometimes when you know what I
Yes.
mean? Like,
Yes.
I get
People
it.
don't
It's
know what to
hard.
say, and
No.
I get that too. Like,
Yeah.
I feel that way also. Like,
Yeah.
there's times where, I hear about a friend, losing a baby, and I'm like, you want to say sorry, but sorry is not enough. Sorry is just they're just words, and it's like, what else can I say,
Yeah. I know. I know. The joke between some of the bereaved moms, and because
Hmm.
I facilitate a support group through the Miss Foundation with in partnership with Full Circle, which is the nonprofit grief center where I work
Yeah,
for bereaved parents. And
that's so
typically,
wonderful.
yeah, typically it tends to be, in therapy, in group therapy and individual counseling, it's female heavy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it tends to be a lot of bereaved moms. And the
Hmm.
joke is, to some degree, people are damned if they do and they're damned if they don't.
Hmm.
Because
Yep.
we're like, I remember thinking you didn't say anything, but then sometimes people would say things and I didn't like what they said.
Yeah.
Right?
I get
One of
that.
the, I'm going off track. I
No,
apologize, but
you're okay.
one of the favorite things was a neighbor up the street with a kid Elliot's age who's
Oh
living, and
no.
my kid's dead.
Hmm.
Um, who came and he actually talked to my husband. I wasn't there, but I remember it left an impression on Terry, my
Mm,
husband. He basically said, like, this sucks. This is so awkward. I don't know what to say. Called it out and was like
yeah.
vulnerable and honest and didn't
Yep.
try to make it better.
Yep.
Didn't try to give a platitude. Um, didn't even say, sorry to your point earlier. It was
Sure.
just, I don't know what to say. This is horrible. This sucks. The people who said this sucks, I was like, yeah, thank you. It
It's
does.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
You hit the nail on the head
you hit the
there.
nail on the head, right? Okay, so just keeping the routine for Bradley's
Yeah.
sake was what we did. Showing up, dropping him off at preschool without his brother, him getting in trouble nonstop at preschool, anger, anger,
Yeah.
anger. And to some degree, because Elliot, they knew Elliot because he attended in the little cherub wing,
Mm,
while I worked part-time. They knew him, and so I think they cut us a lot of leniency and they tried to help our family. And,
sure.
I think they worked really hard in not bothering us, even when he was showing kind of anger in the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had a lot of good support from them, but just literally just showing up every day.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I don't even know if I had the hope that things would get better or change at that point,
Sure.
but that's all really I felt like
Yeah.
I could do. I didn't want to half the time, to be
I
honest,
yeah, I get that.
you
You
know?
just you don't even want to get out of bed most days, right?
No,
It's
you don't
like
want to take a shower. You don't want to,
yeah. Yeah,
right?
I just recorded an episode on self-care and
Hmm.
it's like you just in this like zombie cycle where
Exactly.
you
A
just
hundred percent.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can't even take care of yourself. I
No,
mean, some days you forget to take a sip of water, it's
a
like
hundred
things
percent.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no
So,
desire to eat typically, or the
yep.
opposite, desiring
Sure,
just to,
sure.
yeah, numb.
Yep.
But
Eat your emotions, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. It's just such a foreign land. And I just remember, like, I don't know, going to the grocery store with my mom, like in
Mm-hmm.
that, while his body was with the medical examiner, but before the
Sure.
funeral and celebration of life, and just sitting on I didn't even go inside. I couldn't handle it. I just sat on the
Yeah.
curb. And I just
Mm-hmm.
remember my hands just wouldn't stop shaking, like just
Oh, yep.
how it affects you even physically, you
Yeah.
know?
Oh, physically, I feel like, and people don't realize that either. It's
No.
like you feel, and you're constantly in fight or flight mode. It's like, oh my
Yep.
goodness,
Yep.
can't breathe.
And the grief brain, I forgot my parents' 45th
Oh,
anniversary and then felt like an idiot afterward. But like,
yes.
that's not even on my radar. I'm just trying
Hmm.
to, like, to your point,
Hmm.
get out of bed and get my kid to
Yep.
school. And
Yep.
that's it, literally.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like,
Ugh.
again, it's different because you had him,
Oh, it's 100% different. I had
yeah.
friends in the group that I met who it was
Mhm.
their firstborn,
Yep.
who died. And like you said, comparing, you're not supposed to,
I
but it's
know.
human
I know.
nature.
It
It's
is.
gonna happen. So
I
we would
know.
try to respect each other's. That's
Sure.
not my story. That's not my life. That's your story, your life. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's almost impossible not to. And so
Yeah.
there were things that broke my heart for her
Yeah.
because, she at the time, this develops, but at the time, obviously did not have the role of acting, an act
Yeah.
of mothering. And so that was something that really,
Hmm.
I mean, that's an extra trauma upon it, right? Because that's
Oh,
something that she enjoyed so
yes.
much.
Yep.
Um, whereas I did, right? It's just bizarre.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Yeah, I
And
know.
both sucked. I'm not trying to, you know what I mean?
Right. Like how do you get, how do you manage one, let alone the other? I get what you're saying.
Right. So we would just basically, I think the best thing was just hearing each other out
Yeah.
and just that compassion, that level of compassion and not being scared that
Yeah. Yeah.
another mom with a dead kid has.
Yeah. And I truly love that you're part of those kind of things, like the
Hmm.
groups and the support groups and all that. Can you kind of like walk me through
Sure.
how that came about. I know
Yeah.
with you, and
Yeah.
then, like, with your book and everything, just,
Yeah. Sure.
yeah, I just
Um,
wanna hear all about that, so
so background in counseling, right?
yeah.
Actually, the interesting thing was in school counseling, I was an elementary school counselor. One of my
Okay.
favorite support groups that I led in the school was grief and loss. And I
Oh,
was
yeah.
somebody who would consider not ever having a significant or traumatic loss. Honestly, I had up until Elliot's death, I mean, for me personally, the deaths that you would expect in the way you would expect them.
Mhm.
So I think in that respect, I had a lot of, I know I mentioned this a couple of times, a lot of protective factors.
Sure.
And I'm sitting there with kids who have been through some of them,
Oh,
just
yeah.
stories, right? Just life
Sure,
at
like
this young age,
mhm.
right? Which would be, our kids
Mhm.
now. So
Mhm.
we
Yep.
can see it from that lens. Um, but I remember thinking, this is so important, and this is what it's about. Not the B in science, not the whatever, not missing 10 days of school. Like,
Yep.
this kid cannot attend in the classroom because they are swamped with feelings and heartbreak.
Yeah.
Those groups meant so much to me back then because they were the real, like,
Oh,
what a
I love that.
counselor loves, right?
Yes, it yeah.
Helping, true helping,
Mhm.
and honoring what a kid's going through. So, after Elliot died, with this background,
Mhm.
I was like, well, this is very important, if not life's work. To your point earlier, there's so much pain in this. There's so much trauma. There's so much like
Mhm.
heartbreak.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to happiness wash it. A
Nope.
lot of times I get to see some of the coolest parts of the human spirit, some
Yes,
of the most
yes.
amazing, beautiful, to use
Mhm.
your word,
Mhm.
um, just sitting with people, right? And I work with
Yeah.
kids and adults. And whether that be one-on-one
Mhm.
counseling or in the group setting, it's just so I attended the group
Mhm.
back after Elliot died, the same group. And at the time, I'm good friends with her. My friend Carla, she was leading the group back then. Her son Theo died. You have to, for Dr. Cacciatore's Miss Foundation, if you would like to lead a group, it's actually not required that you're a counselor or anything. You just have to have a dead kid.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? Because
Yeah,
her
like
model is she wants someone who's going to
no. Yeah, I mean, you wanna unfortunately
get it. And I think there's a lot of unfortunately learned things because being a bereaved
sure.
parent, right? And so when my friend Carla, she'd led it for like 12, 15 years or something,
Mhm.
was just looking for a different stage in life. I had always felt like, one day I would like to give back and do that, down the
Mhm.
road. And so um, she was like, I don't want to do it anymore. I was like, I'd like to do it. And so it just kind of happened that way. So it's
Yeah.
monthly. It's so affirming to see there are some moms in there who have had multiple losses.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and some of the losses span, we're talking decades.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it's so what I hear is there's often new grievers that come in, right?
Sure.
Um, but the ones who return often say, "Uh, outside of here, with this many years on, nobody wants to hear about this anymore." You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's so
Yeah.
far out. To your point earlier, not don't talk about it. Like
Right.
the pictures of, our loved ones were taken down from the mantle and put away after
Sure.
they died,
Sure. Yep.
right? And to some degree that's gotten better, but
I know. Yeah.
yeah, it's still there. So
Yeah.
anyway, just having a safe space where there's no agenda. You can
Yes.
laugh 1 minute and not have everybody think, oh, you're better, because they
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
that you're going
Yeah.
to be right back there sitting in it in a hot second. So it's just
I
really reaffirming.
I love that. I
Yeah,
really do. And can you share where you're local to? The,
yeah, sure,
if
absolutely.
there's
So I'm in Richmond, Virginia.
okay.
So kind of like Central Virginia area. And Dr. Cacciatore, so that's Full Circle Grief Center serves
Mhm.
Central Virginia, and it's a nonprofit. So that's the cool thing about it.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, so like the support group all our support groups are free. Um, and for one-on-one counseling, we take insurance, and we have a fairly low self-pay rate if you do not,
Mhm.
have insurance or don't
Sure.
want to use it. And then what's cool is like that funds keeping the groups free, essentially.
Yeah. That's wonderful. We have a couple local support
Yeah.
groups
So
here
you
that
are, where are you?
Oh, I'm in Ohio.
Oh
Ashland,
yeah.
Ohio.
Cool.
Yeah. So we're not too
I like that.
couple hours away. Yeah. But yeah, we have, just these support groups. And I will say, just I've been to a few, and the peace that I feel
Hmm,
after connecting with other lost moms,
hmm.
just hearing the stories and how they're grieving and how they're healing, it's just really it's brought me to the place I am now, just
Wow.
being able to like connect with women like you and just
Hmm.
hear your stories. And
Hmm.
I hate it for you. I hate that you've had to face
Ditto.
this unimaginable.
Because you know how
Yeah, exactly.
awful it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, so kind of
Can I ask
leading
you real
into.
quick? Can
Oh
I ask you?
yeah. Yeah.
Can I take the
Yeah,
wheel for a second?
absolutely.
Okay.
Ask away.
What about you? You asked me the question,
Yeah,
how was it for you after the losses and after, like what,
sure.
how did you grieve? How did you find your footing?
Yeah.
I mean, we're all still finding our footing. I don't want to
Yeah.
make it sound like it's
So
done.
no, I'm so glad you asked me because it's something that I've only shared
Oh,
one of my podcasts because I haven't recorded too many episodes yet. So this is be kind of interesting to talk
okay.
about. So after we lost Esme, which was our first daughter
Oh,
at 20 weeks, we went to our ultrasound and that's how we learned, her heart was no longer beating. And um we had never dealt with anything like that before, my husband and I. So,
mm,
you know, that was like shell shock for us. We were just like,
sure,
I mean, we came home and I didn't even know what to do. Like we actually picked the boys up from school early and then we sat them down and they were still young at that time, so they didn't really understand. I was
sure.
only 20, I mean, I shouldn't say only 20 weeks, but I was 20 weeks long. They didn't really understand at that point, we're no longer going to have a baby. So that
Mm,
grief was a lot different than when we lost Lainey. Like they came to the hospital, they met her, they got to say goodbye. So coming home from that, I feel
mm.
like, and of course, we had everything set up 37 weeks, you're ready to bring the baby, bringing your baby home. So, for us, that the difference in our grief journeys there was a lot different because, again, I'll go back to something that you
Yeah.
said with having being able to come home to my boys was a blessing because I cannot imagine coming home from the hospital without a baby to an empty home. And I know there are so many moms that do.
Yeah.
And
And
that,
I'm
I
thinking of
mean,
their faces right
oh,
now
I know
on my
it
caseload. Yep.
hurts my heart for them because just like you said, that quietness, that emptiness, just, and for me, I got to still have my boys here. I have two healthy living boys at the time, um, that are helping me heal, that are healing with me, grieving with me, so we're going through it together.
Yeah.
So for me, I was grateful for that, so something that I'll share is we have a third boy now. He was born 6 months ago. So
Oh,
yeah, yes, so
wow.
we have
Congrats.
thank you. We have our little rainbow baby boy.
Oh,
That was a whole other journey,
I bet.
pregnancy after loss.
I bet.
Um that was just, you also grieve, because it's like, you're going through this pregnancy, like, am I going to get a living
Oh
baby
gosh,
out of this,
sure,
I mean,
sure.
that's a whole other
There's a
process.
lot of
So,
trauma there.
yes,
Hmm.
and it is, and just working through that. So, I will say my boys have gone to counseling. We went to counseling together. I put them in counseling
Awesome.
by themselves, and I think that it was so helpful for them. And they'll ask, can we go to counseling,
It's
So
fun. If the counselor's
I
doing a good
know,
job, it
exactly.
should be a little bit
Yeah.
fun.
That's
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
really love that because I want them to heal, but I also want them to, again, like what you said, be able to feel those emotions and understand
Hmm.
that you are going to face grief in your
Yep.
life,
Exactly.
um, but how we work through that and how we handle that. And I feel like as parents too, especially as mothers, really just helping them
Hmm.
to navigate that journey.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
and that's again why I asked about Bradley because I just having a child, that
Yeah.
loses a
Yeah.
sibling, that's just a
It's
whole other
just it's
realm. Yeah.
I think the way I described it recently was I'm real. I'm real here.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of a sick kind of torture.
No, it's
Because you're grieving yourself. Whatever. I'm
yeah,
an adult. It sucks,
sure.
but I'm an adult.
Hmm.
You know. But then watching your young kid
Yeah,
have that level of pain of something that you can't control and you can't make it better,
sure.
ultimately.
Yeah,
I mean, there's things you can do to support them, but you
yeah,
can't fix it and you can't take it away as much as
absolutely.
you want to. And
Sure.
that's doing a disservice to them ultimately. Um, and I think that piece was the thing I struggled with the most was
Hmm.
his grief.
Hmm.
There's so many things, but like that's the thing that really just was so heartbreaking for me.
Hmm.
And also the images in my head of them growing older together and
Yeah,
then not having that.
sure.
That was just so incredibly painful. And so I mean, I never, this is other thing that I found interesting. People tell
Hmm.
you to journal. Screw that. That's what I like to say because I could never bring myself to journal. I always felt like it had to, this is probably more indicative of me right now, but there was pressure on myself. If I'm writing about
Yeah.
my dead kid, it
Hmm.
has to be like amazing because it's about him and my love for
Sure.
him. So
Sure.
I put so much pressure on myself that I could never do it. I never wanted to do it.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. It just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
Um, and
And that's
so,
okay. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, I
yeah,
don't think,
exactly.
yeah.
I think there's
Yeah.
so many different ways to grieve that
Yep.
are out there. Yeah. And you want to find something that actually works for you.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
so the point was when I just started writing something,
Yeah.
I just randomly one January sat down and it was like this fire. I don't know where the hell it came from, what was
Yeah.
going on, but and I didn't even tell my husband because I was like a little embarrassed. So I just
No,
started
yeah.
writing something and it was itching a couple of different
Hmm.
scratches. Like it was
Sure.
getting at me addressing just the heartbreak of not seeing them grow up together.
Yeah.
In addition to my frustration with the responses I would often get from people
Hmm.
when
Hmm.
they saw him and just downplayed his grief or emphasized on me instead of him. And I
Yeah.
have a background with little kids and school counseling, so
Yeah. So
my passion is
I
kids.
mean,
Yeah, yeah.
yes.
Um, and so I think that's where it came from
Yeah.
was this like thing deep down here that I couldn't ever really or didn't want to give words to.
Sure.
Um, and so
I feel
that's yeah,
like, yeah, and I feel too like it's a way to heal. Like it's like helping you heal,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
So, yeah,
100%.
so
It
was
gave me
your
like a vehicle to like get it
yes.
out a little bit, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So tell me more about this book that you wrote. Yeah.
So, I queried everybody and his brother. And I hate to I hate to tell you, nobody wants another book about a dead kid. Um,
No, I
so
think it's awesome that you
thank
wrote
you.
that because
Thank
again, I
you.
think it's going back to, helping your son heal, helping you heal, helping
Yeah,
your family
yeah,
heal, you
yeah,
know?
totally. And so eventually just persistence and sheer just like bullying. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't bully people, but just keeping up with people and just
Mhm.
like not going away eventually wore
Mhm.
somebody down, wore a publisher down. And so got an offer and um, still felt really surreal to have
Mhm.
someone want to see it and then
Yeah.
also an illustrator want to draw. And I fought really hard, or I was very interested in having hand drawn just because I thought someone sitting there with my words and putting a level of, um, but then also the illustrator was able to kind of use my living son and
That's so
model
great.
like a
Yes.
caricature of him. So looks like him, a caricature of him. Um, and Dennis Oth is the illustrator, and he's just so, I mean, just to be able to just draw like that
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just draw emotions and just
Right.
amazing stuff. So it was a joy to work with him, and I think
Mhm.
he came to the book launch, and I remember seeing he was crying. So just appreciating that someone is
Yes.
not just he gets it. It's not just a book. It's a mission. It's a family
Yeah.
family,
Absolutely.
like it's our family's
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
So it was really reaffirming to see his level of care
Yeah.
put
That's
into
so
it.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, well, thank you. This has been
Yeah.
such a great
So nice
conversation.
to meet you.
Yeah, you
I
too. I
just love
loved
how
connecting.
bereaved moms can just go
I know.
right
We
in
can
there. You
just
know what I
dive right
mean?
in.
Like just
Yes,
right in there and
absolutely.
like not
I
be
feel like we
scared.
talked like before this, but we haven't,
That's
like
great. That's such a great point. Like
yes.
kindred spirits, like
Yes, I
just,
know.
yeah,
And
that
again,
feeling you get.
it's not a path that any of us would choose, but
No,
here we
or
are.
wish
This
on
is the
anybody.
plan. Yes. So, is there anything else that you would like to share, with my listeners? Really just about grief and, how, your journey,
Yeah.
anything that you would like to share?
Yeah, thank you, first of all.
Yeah.
So I think the things that I find myself coming back to over and over again, with myself
Hmm.
and with others in my work, or even the support groups is trust, trust in yourself as a griever.
I
And
love
that
that.
develops over time. It's not,
Hmm.
but trusting that any one big feeling that comes along or feelings that to notice it, let it be, right? We talk about as much as possible being curious about it, what it's telling you.
Sure.
So many times I hear people telling me, I know I should be doing better, or that pressure we put on ourselves
Hmm.
because of society's timestamp. Oh, it's
Yeah.
been a year. Why am I not better?
Hmm.
Because you shouldn't be. This
Right.
is grief, and it's showing you how much of a love you have with that
Yeah.
person. Um, so trusting yourself as in grief, right? Knowing that there's no right or wrong way to do this, no matter
Yes.
what anybody tells you.
Yes, I
Um,
love that.
yeah, the timestamp that society says, throw it out the window.
Yep.
Yep. I'm a firm believer that I will be grieving till I die.
Oh, you will. Yes,
Yes,
you are.
exactly.
Yep.
The way it looks, it morphs and it changes, right?
Sure. Yep.
But just because
Absolutely.
I work through the contents in a box, whether it be guilt or whatever, regret, and I work through it and I put it on a shelf like back there, guess what? At some point, I'm going to be bringing it right back down and
Hmm.
addressing it again. So it's not linear. I always say it's cooked spaghetti up against a wall. Like it's
Oh,
just,
that's a
but
good,
just
yeah,
trusting
analogy. Yeah.
yourself that you can navigate that
Yes,
is
absolutely.
is
Navigating that
huge.
grief
Yeah.
journey.
Hmm. And then the last thing is the power of continuing bonds, knowing that you can still carry your loved one forward with you. And
Yes.
that determines like everyone has a different way of doing that, right?
Yeah.
Um, but for you were saying different ways that you and your family honor
Hmm.
your
Yes.
daughters. And we do that too, like on special days or just things we do as a family because it's
I
very
love
important
that.
to us to carry them forward with us
Yeah.
in different ways. So,
Yeah. I love
yeah.
that. And would you mind sharing where people can find you, find your book?
Sure, yeah. I am on primarily LinkedIn. That's my jam. My website is livethatlove.com because
Awesome.
I see it's also livethatgrief.com, but I always like
Yeah.
to highlight live that love because I see grief as being love. And so there's info about me on there. And then where do you find the book? On Amazon, of course.
Yeah.
So
Perfect. Yeah, I
it's
looked it
all
up
on there.
earlier and it
Yeah.
popped up all over Amazon. That's
Yeah.
great. Oh, man.
Caitlin,
Well,
I love this and
yes.
I'm just so grateful that
Yeah.
you feel like interested, led to do
Yes.
this.
Thank
It's so
you.
needed. I mean, gosh, like
Yeah.
I would have been in every week, like tuning in, back in
Oh,
the day.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's been truly an honor to have you as a guest. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it, Sarah.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Caitlin.
Oh, to my listeners, thank you for being here. If this episode resonated with you, please feel free to share it with another lost mom. And again, thank you, Sarah, so much.
Lovely.
Tune in next time for another episode of Grief and Motherhood.